Hello friend, welcome back to my channel. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. It's Tim here, and in this video, I'm going to guide you through the steps to create this fairy tale inspired landscape painting. One of my earliest memories of falling in love with art and animation was the opening scene of Beauty and the Beast. That entire movie means so much to me. I used to watch it over and over again when I was a kid. And fun fact about me, when I was in high school, they put on Beauty and the Beast as our musical that year, and I got to play Gaston, so the musical really means a lot to me too. If you ever get a chance to see it, I highly recommend the musical version as well. So I really wanted to paint a scene inspired by it. We'll be covering a lot of fun topics in this tutorial, so I'm super excited to begin. If you recreate this painting and are on Instagram, I would absolutely love to see it, so please tag me at Timstar Studio. I have my iPad screen set up to display in color profile RGB display P3. And to check this, when you go to add a new canvas, you're just going to tap the little folder looking icon with the plus within the white box next to the words new canvas right here. Click color profile and just make sure that the settings are set to RGB display P3. And I am painting with an Apple Pencil Generation 2, I believe. Upcoming here are the hex codes for the palette of colors that you'll need to be able to paint along with me. And I have the hex codes listed here in the expanded palette view, which is 3 rows of 10. You'll just take an empty palette and go to the value section in the palette of Procreate. And where it says hexadecimal, you'll just type each code across, which should give you a palette that looks like this. I will be using this palette though in compact mode for the tutorial. To put the palette into compact mode, at the top of the palette window, there's a tiny little gray rectangle right here. You will just touch it and move the palette window over, which will minimize the window. And then the far right option at the bottom with the 6 squares together, you will touch that, which will open the compact view for the palette, which will give you a palette that looks like this. Upcoming here are the main brushes that we're going to be using for this painting, which are all in the default library of Procreate except for the damp brush, but I do have a video up on my channel on how to recreate a version of this brush from scratch for the iPad, so if you need it, definitely go check it out. The first step of our tutorial is taking a screenshot of this trace outline layer so we have a guide for our painting. Then you're going to insert it into a square size canvas on Procreate. And then you're going to turn the opacity of the screenshot layer down, that way you can match the edges up. And then you're going to match the edges of what will become the painting to the edges of the canvas, just like this. And then you're going to add a new layer and trace over it to create an outline. I recommend using the technical pen. I feel like that's the easiest thing to use for it. Please feel free to take any breaks that you need along the way, and when you're ready, let's begin. All right, we're gonna go ahead and turn our trace layer down. Let's turn it down to like 10% or so. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we're gonna put that layer underneath of the trace outline layer. Let's go ahead and open our color palette. Let's grab the third color in the first row and fill the entire canvas with this color using Color Drop. Let's go ahead and add a new layer on top of it. We're going to switch over to using the paintbrush now with the soft airbrush. Let's do full size with full opacity. Let's grab the fourth color in the first row, this light shade of blue. And starting here on the left-hand side in the upper third of the painting, just a little bit above where the halfway mark is, we're going to paint a line across just like this. Hold it down, straighten it out, and then we're going to use Color Drop and fill this in, and then get rid of that line right there. Now let's grab the fifth color in the first row, this lightest shade of gray-blue, and right around the center of the painting, I'm going to paint a straight line across, holding it down to straighten it out. And then using the paintbrush, I'm going to fill in the rest of the painting here, just like this. Now let's use Gaussian blur on this layer. And we're going to blur this layer to around 53%. And now we're going to paint the clouds. So in this upcoming section, we're going to be using a circular scrubbing paint stroke. We will combine these two to create our clouds. This is one of my absolute favorite ways to add texture when painting a sky. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and now we're going to paint the clouds. Let's switch over to using the paintbrush now with the damp brush. Let's use like 7% brush size with like 77% or so opacity. Now using the first color in the first row, the color white. Starting right around here, right where the dip of the trees is, we're going to use circular scrubbing paint strokes, following the line of trees up to create some cloud texture for our sky. Just like this. Finishing off here on the right-hand side. Now let's switch over to using the blending tool now. Let's switch over to using the damp brush with that as well. Let's do like 15% brush size with around 34% opacity. And then using those same circular scrubbing paint strokes along the top edge of the clouds, just like this, we're going to work our way up, blending this new color texture up into the sky. I'm just creating a nice hazy texture. Create something kind of magical and dreamy for our sky here. It'll really make our castle stand out here in a moment. And then I'm going to finish that off using those same paint strokes along the bottom edge just to kind of smoke that out. Just like that. Now let's paint the castle. Let's add a new layer. We're going to switch over to using the paintbrush now with the water pen. Let's do like 7% brush size with full opacity. Using the sixth color in the first row, this dark shade of gray. Let's go ahead and outline our castle, just like this. We're going to go ahead and close off the bottom of the shape. And I'm actually going to manually fill it in. I find when you use the water pen, color drop doesn't work so well. So if it works for you, then you're more than welcome to fill it in. But I'm just going to manually fill it in here. I'm going to go ahead and turn our trace outline layer off for just a moment. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. We're going to switch back over to the paintbrush with the damp brush again. Let's do like 7% brush size with full opacity using the first color in the first row again, the color white. Starting right around here, right to the left of the castle, we're going to use our circular scrubbing paint strokes and paint some color right at the base edge of the castle. Just like that, kind of filling that in a little bit. Once you have this new cloud color on, let's switch back over to the blending tool with the damp brush. Let's do like 7% brush size with around 40% or so opacity. And using circular scrubbing paint strokes along the top edge, we're going to lightly smoke out this new color. Just lightly puffing that out, which will help to make our castle look even higher in the sky. And we'll add quite a bit of depth to our painting. And I'm just following the line up here, finishing off, blending that bottom edge out. I'm going to take this layer and let's turn it down just a little bit. Let's turn the opacity of this layer down to like 60% or so. And then I'm going to come along this top, oops. Let's switch back to the blending tool if it's not already on. And just along this top edge again, I'm just going to lightly smoke that out just a little bit more. And then smoothing that out just a little bit. Just like that. And then when you're happy with your blending, let's go ahead and turn the trace outline layer back on. And now we're going to paint the trees. So in this upcoming section, I'm going to be using the water pen and an up and down zigzag paint stroke that's random, close together, and of varying heights to create the illusion of background trees that are taller and shorter. And then I'm going to be using the same paint strokes with the blending tool and the water pen to blend them out with. This is one of my favorite ways to create trees. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the water pen. Let's do like 10% brush size with full opacity. Let's grab the first color in the second row, this dark shade of green. Now along this edge right here, we're going to paint a line connecting the left side and then connecting the right side. And then using color drop, we're going to fill that space in. And then we're going to clean up that line here just like that. Let's use around 7% brush size with full opacity and using the first color in the second row. Starting here on this left-hand side, and I'm going to start right around here at the top of this. I know that the trees extend up until here, but we're going to put some highlight color on them here in just a second. We don't want to blend them too high yet. So starting right around here, which is the top of these bushes here, using up and down zigzag paint strokes of varying heights, we're going to follow our trace outline down, following it down into this little dip here, and then working our way back up. Kind of making each new tree kind of a random height, and then finishing off here on the right side. I'm going to up my brush size just a little bit, like 18%, and we're going to fill in this space here manually. Filling that in, ending that right around there. Now let's shrink our brush size again. Let's go to like 9% with full opacity. I'm going to zoom up here. Let's grab the second color in the second row. And now moving upwards just a little bit, we're going to add some highlight color, which will bring those trees up to our lineup, just like that. Following this down here into the point, we're going to move this over. And these trees here will cover the base of the castle. We're going to repeat this going up just like that, making each one random. And finishing up here on the right-hand side. I'm going to fill in these little spaces here just like that. Let's go ahead and make a duplicate of this layer. And now we're going to merge these two layers back together. And now let's blend out our trees. Now we're going to come back up here. Now going to the blending tool again. Let's switch over to the blending tool with the water pen. Let's do like 7% brush size with full opacity. Now starting here on this left-hand side, using the same zigzag paint strokes that we used to paint with, here along the top edge and then working our way across, we're going to start blending these trees out. And starting up here, and we're going to work our way down in rows, which will create some really beautiful dimension for our forest. Now working our way back up across the outline, using transparencies to our advantage. And these, because they're blended out on a separate layer against the background, create some really beautiful transparency effects. Just making sure to create some higher and lower, some shorter and taller trees. Create a really natural look for the forest. And then ending right here on the right side. Let's go ahead and move down a little bit. And now starting here right around the middle, we're going to start dragging this middle color upwards. Kind of grabbing from the bottom just a little bit. Creates definitely a very layered forest look. And this is one of my absolute favorite ways to create density for background trees. Super easy. I love the water pen too. It's one of my favorite paintbrushes. I hope you guys are having fun and enjoying the tutorial so far. Hope you are enjoying your summer. Now starting here on this left-hand side, we're going to start dragging and we're going to start blending another row of trees, blending the middle and the bottom together, which creates a really nice, dense looking forest here. And then following our way back up. Just filling in any areas that need a little attention. And when you're happy painting your background trees, we're going to move on and work on our front trees and bushes. I'm going to go ahead and turn our trace outline layer up just a little bit. Let's turn the opacity up to like 21%. Let's go back down to the tree layer. So let's go ahead and add a new layer. Still using the paintbrush with the water pen. Let's do like 12% brush size with full opacity. Now using the third color in the second row. Starting over here on the left-hand side, we're going to go ahead and fill this tree in. Just using circular scrubbing paint strokes all the way to the bottom, following the trace outline, and then starting here at the bottom and working our way back up. Now let's grab the fourth color in the second row. And now we're going to add just a little bit of color dimension. So right around the top, we're going to use those same paint strokes and add just a little bit of color dimension right around there. And then along the top of the right side as well. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Using the fifth color in the second row, starting on this left-hand side, using the same paint strokes, we're going to follow this line up all the way down, just like this. And then along the right side as well. Following our outline up to the right side. Now let's grab the sixth color in the second row. And following what we did before, we're going to put a little bit of this dimensional color right along the top, just working our way down, and then working our way up to the right, and working our way back up. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Using the first color in the third row, this lighter shade of green. Starting on this left-hand side, we're going to go ahead and fill this bush in, just like that. Filling this right side bush in the same way. Let's use the second color in the third row. And now here on the bottom, I'm going to add just a little bit of color along this bottom edge here, just like that, and then along the bottom of the right-hand side. Now using the third color in the third row, we're going to fill in this last bush here, and then this bush right here. Now using the fourth color in the third row, just like we did before with the last one, we're going to put a little bit of this color along the bottom edge here, and then along the bottom edge of the bush on the right-hand side. And when you get that filled in, now we're going to paint the grass. Let's merge these three bush layers back together. Now I'm going to go underneath of it, so we're going to be tapping the tree layer, and let's add a layer underneath of it. Let's use the fifth color in the third row, and we're going to paint the grass. So along this edge here, I'm going to create a little arc shape going to the right-hand side and then to the left side, just filling that shape in. And then let's use color drop and fill in the entire bottom. And then filling in that line here. Let's add a new layer. Now using the sixth color in the third row, Right around here, we're going to paint a straight line across, just like that. And then using color drop, let's fill in the bottom of the painting. So that way that dark green fills in the lower half. Now using the first color in the fourth row, right around here, which is the top of that bush, let's paint a straight line across. And then manually, I'm just going to fill in the bottom of the painting, working my way back over to the right. So we'll have 3 tiers of color here, just like this. Now using Gaussian blur, let's blur it out to around 52%. Let's go ahead and duplicate this layer. And using Gaussian blur again, let's blur that layer to around 25%. And now let's merge the bush layer here in the top and merge it to this bottom grass layer, just like that. So we'll have the tree layer in the background here, and then this layer, which will be the front. Now let's blend them out. I'm going to go ahead and turn our trace outline layer off for just a moment. That way we can see it a little bit easier. Now starting up here, we're going to switch over to using the damp brush with the blending tool. Let's use around 3% brush size with around 45% or so opacity, and using circular scrubbing paint strokes, almost the way I would use to paint clouds with. We're going to start lightly buffing out our bushes, kind of creating some different heights within it and some texture throughout, working in rows along the top and then across the outline, just like this. And then working my way downwards, blending the middle and the top. I'm going to blend that edge out just a little bit more. Bringing that down, making it look less uniform. And now right here, using the same paint strokes, I'm going to work my way back up to the top. Finishing here on the right hand side, just like that. Now let's work our way back down and across, working that middle and bottom color together, kind of preserving that bottom edge just a little bit. Gonna blend that out just a little bit more. Now let's come over here back to the right, and I'm gonna repeat this same process on the bush underneath of it. And actually, I may up my brush size just a little bit. Let's up it to like 5%. Sorry, that was making it way too hard. There we go. And we're going to just lightly buff and blend these bushes out. Almost like we're creating green clouds, only bushes. And we're going to repeat this on the right-hand side. And I actually am going to take this new bigger brush just lightly along this upper edge, along that back bush again. Sorry, I was making it way too hard on us there, just to make sure the textures match just a little bit better. And I'm going to work my way back down here. And then we're going to blend these two colors together. And right here where it meets the grass, I'm just going to very lightly go back and forth, blending those two colors together. Just kind of smoothing that edge over right in the center. And then smoothing that edge right there. And then I'm going to blend these two colors back together here. And then we're going to work our way to the next set of bushes, repeating the same. Just lightly smoothing where it meets the grass at. Coming over here, repeating that on the right-hand side. blending this color into the middle here. Smoothing that out. And we're going to work our way back over here, finishing off this last bush here. Smoothing that over. Going to finish that up right here. Then blending that out along the bottom edge, just kind of cleaning up anything that looks a little out of place or that you want to have just a little bit more texture. And then when you're happy with your blending, we're going to add just a little bit of shadow for dimension. All right, let's go ahead and add a new layer. We're going to put this new layer into soft light. Let's use the second color in the first row, the color black. Let's still use the water pen, it's fine. Using the paintbrush, and starting on this left-hand side, we're going to paint just a little bit of low light along that edge right there. And then along this edge here, let's add some to the middle bush. And then to these front bushes here, that way there's a little bit more definition at the bottom. Now let's switch back over to the blending tool. Still with the damp brush, about 6% brush size with 45% opacity or so. And with a very light hand using the same circular scrubbing paint strokes, we're going to lightly blend these out. Just kind of softening that area up a little bit, which will definitely create a better edge towards the bottom in the grass. We're going to repeat that for this middle one. Figured it'd probably be easier just to work our way down with this new color. And then we're going to repeat that across the right-hand side. And it does help to blend out in rows. It keeps everything nice and neat and evenly blended. Then repeating that across the middle here. And then finishing that off along the bottom. Smoothing that out along the bottom edge there. And I'll smooth that out over here. Now we're going to turn this layer down quite a bit. Let's turn the opacity of it down to like 34% or so. And I wanted to take a moment to thank you so much for supporting my channel. I hope you're having fun painting. If you're enjoying this video so far, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps the channel out. And now we're going to add some shadow and highlight to our painting. Let's go ahead and add a new layer, and we're going to put this layer into overlay again. Now let's switch over to using the soft airbrush. Let's use full size and full opacity, and we're going to create a nice little vignette for our painting. So along this left side edge here, we're going to paint a straight line down from top to bottom across the left side. Now from left to right along the bottom edge here, and then from top to bottom on the right hand side. Connecting like that, and it doesn't need to be too perfect. Now let's round off the corners here on the left side and then here on the right hand side. Oops, that was too much. Let's smooth over the right hand side just like that. Now let's use Gaussian blur, and we're going to blur that layer to around 39%. Let's go ahead and turn this layer down quite a bit. Let's turn it down to like 51%. Let's go ahead and add another new layer, and we're going to repeat the same process, putting this layer into soft light as well. Still using the paintbrush with the soft airbrush, we're going to shrink our size to like 45%, and we're going to create an even smaller color stripe across the left side from the top to the bottom, just like before, only a lot thinner. And then repeating it along the bottom, and then the right hand side. And then we're going to smooth both of the corners out. Now let's use Gaussian blur. and blur that layer to around 20%. Let's go ahead and turn this layer's opacity down. Let's turn it down to like 29%. Let's go ahead and create a copy canvas layer and paste it over the top. Let's add a new layer, and we're going to put that layer into overlay. Let's turn our trace outline layer back on. We're going to switch over to using the paintbrush now with the damp brush. And let's use around 2% brush size with around 50% or so opacity. Let's grab the first color in the first row, the color white. And in this section, I'm going to be using what I like to call the sad face highlight, which is a silly name for a type of back and forth scrubbing paint stroke I like to use a lot that's slightly downturned at the ends, kind of creating a downturned arc shape that looks like a sad face. And using our sad face highlight, we're going to create some highlight for our grass. Working our way down from top to bottom. And I'll probably fill in the left side first. This will create some really nice grass texture without a whole lot of work, which I like to use a lot. Working smarter and not harder. Now, I'm not putting as much grass texture right around the water area because we're going to put some darker textures there in just a moment. But we're going to go ahead and fill this bottom section in here, just like that. And to get a little bit of a stronger refresh of color, all you have to do is lift the pencil up because the color will trail off a little bit the longer the brush goes. Just finishing off along the bottom edge there. Then I'm going to repeat the same thing here on the right side. Starting my way at the top, working my way down, that way the color trails off. Repeating the same paint strokes, working our way down. Put just a little bit down here just so there's a continuity and no areas of no texture. Just like that. Let's switch back over to the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do like 7% brush size and using around 24% or so opacity. And using the same paint strokes in a very light hand, we're going to lightly buff and blend this texture into the grass. Now we're going to zoom up here. Let's go ahead and add another new layer, and we're going to put that layer into soft light. Switch to using the paintbrush again with the damp brush. Let's do like 3% brush size, 70% or so opacity. Let's grab the second color in the first row. And starting here at the top, we're going to trace the shape of the water here, just creating a nice little shadow for it. And then here, I'm actually going to trace the entire shape of the water we have drawn. Following it down to the next one. Repeating that across this one. Working our way down. And then we're going to fill in following the edge. And it can be a little over the outline just a little bit, but you'll want to go ahead and fill all of this in just like this. I'm going to go ahead and turn our trace outline layer off for a moment. Let's switch to using the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do like 5% brush size. Let's do like 38% or so opacity. And we're going to lightly buff following the shape. We're going to buff and blend this out just a little bit. And we're going to just follow that shape here, creating a nice little shadow for our water here. Repeating that along this one. Working our way down and then down again. Just soften that up a little bit more. And then repeating that across the bigger pond here at the bottom. Now when you get that blended out, let's go ahead and turn this layer down just a little bit. Let's turn the opacity down to like 60%. And now let's paint the stream. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the water pen. Let's do like 4% brush size, full opacity. Let's use the second color in the fourth row. I'm going to turn our trace outline layer back on. Let's go ahead and create a layer above the trace outline layer. That way it's easier to see. And using the water pen, we're going to trace the shape of this water here. And when you reach this, we're going to break this into 3, just like that. Now we're going to fill the entire shape of the pond in, leaving just a little bit of the shadowed area still visible. Now when you reach this, we're going to follow this with 3 again, filling this bottom section in here, just like this. Let's follow this here again. I'm repeating the pattern. Going to create a little pool right there. Now for this big one, we're going to follow each line up here, creating little Ys that connect. And now we're just going to fill in this bottom shape here, just like this. And I always say with water, less is more. You can always add more, but it is very difficult to take away once it's there. So I would work in smaller sections with smaller pools of water at first. I want to take our trace outline layer away just for a moment to see how it's looking. I think I want to just clean up this little bottom edge here just a little bit. Just like that. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Let's shrink our brush size quite a bit. Let's shrink it to like the smallest 2% that you can get to, still full opacity. Let's grab the third color in the fourth row. And now we're going to trace just a little bit of this new highlight color on the top, just following our line up here. And we're going to follow it into the pond. I'm just going to put this color in the center of this little pond here just to create a little bit of dimension. Just like that. Let's go ahead and bring it down here into the next pool. And we're going to fill this in just like that. And we're going to repeat this going down, just following the shapes we created. Connecting those just a little bit better. We've got some water that is not connecting. Ooh, I like that. So if you want to, you can create some nice little Ys that attach, create a really pretty little stream effect, just like that. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of color here along the bottom. Just adding it just sparingly here, connecting and blending these new areas in, giving our water just a little more dimension. I'm going to go ahead and create a copy canvas layer and paste it over the top. I'm going to move our trace outline layer back up to the top, and we're going to turn that back on. And now it's time to paint the bushes and the foliage in the front corners. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. Now down here, we're still going to use the paintbrush with the water pen. Let's use like 8% brush size, full opacity. Now using the first color in the second row, we're going to fill in this shape right here, creating a nice bush across the water. Now using the blending tool again with the damp brush, let's do like 4% brush size, 40% or so opacity. And using that same paint stroke from earlier, we're going to lightly buff and blend this new bush out. Just lightly buffing that out. I'm actually going to make a duplicate of this layer. And on this duplicate layer, let's use hue and saturation. Turn that down a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 48% and up the saturation to around 66%. Let's use the blending tool again. I'm going to up the opacity to like 60%. And using that same paint stroke from earlier, we're going to lightly buff and blend this new bush out. Just lightly buffing that out. I'm actually going to make a duplicate of this layer. And turn that down a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 48% and up the saturation to around 66%. So use the blending tool again. I'm going to up the opacity to like 60%. And we're going to just buff along that top edge just a little bit more. Create some nice dimension through there. Create some nice transparency too between the water and this bush. Let's turn our trace outline off for a moment just to check it out. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and turn our trace outline layer back on. And we're going to basically repeat this across this side. So I'm going to merge these two layers back together. Let's add a new layer. Still using the paintbrush with the water pen. Let's grab the first color in the second row again. And I'm going to fill in this shape here. And actually, let's use hue and saturation and turn this down. Let's turn it down to like 48% and up the saturation to like 74%. And then still using that same color, let's put a little bit of this highlight over across the top. Now let's turn our trace outline off, switch over to the blending tool with the same settings, and we're going to lightly blend out the top. Here, just along the edges. And then along the middle, connecting these two colors together. Creating some really nice textures in there. This scrubbing paint stroke has probably become my most used because it is so versatile and create bushes and trees and clouds. Definitely one of my favorite painting techniques. Drag that down just a little bit more. And then when you're happy with your bushes, we're going to merge these two layers back together. Let's add a new layer. Still using the water pen, let's use like 2% brush size, full opacity. Now using the first color in the second row again, we're going to paint some grass strokes here. Just very loose, kind of wherever you want. And we're going to come over to the other side, and I'm going to add just a couple over here. Let's go to hue and saturation, and I'm going to up the saturation just a little bit. Let's go to max. Let's add a new layer, and using that same color again, coming over here again, we're going to add just a couple more smaller grass strokes within the ones we just painted here, just like this. And then over top of this one. Now we're going to go to hue and saturation and up the brightness and the saturation a little bit. Let's do like 53% and then up the saturation all the way. And I'm actually going to close hue and saturation and then open it again. And I actually want to turn the saturation down just by one, so around 49%. Actually, let's down the brightness just a smidge. Let's do like 48%. Yeah, I think that looks good. And now let's paint the trees in the front. Let's go ahead and merge these three layers together. Let's add a new layer. I'm going to turn our trace outline layer back on. Let's switch, still using the water pen with the paintbrush. Let's do like 10% brush size, full opacity. Now let's use the fourth color in the fourth row. Now along this left-hand side, starting from top to bottom, we're going to paint a line for our first tree, just like that. And then along this line here, and then finishing off that tree branch. And then coming over to the right-hand side, I'm going to paint a straight line down for the first one. And then for the tree branch here, connecting there. And if you need to make that just a little bit wider, definitely feel free to do so. Let's go underneath of this layer. And then we're going to add a new layer. So this new layer is going to be underneath of the tree trunk layer. Let's grab the first color in the second row again. Let's up our brush size to like 20% full opacity. Still using the paintbrush and the water pen. We are going to fill in our tree color here. which will kind of close in the borders of our painting a little bit and create a really nice magical feel, almost like you're standing in the woods looking up at this magical fairy tale castle you just found. And then starting over here on the right hand side, we're just going to fill in this tree shape here, just like that. Let's use hue and saturation. Turn the brightness down just a little bit, like 49%. Now using the paintbrush again, we're going to add just a little bit of that same color around the edges, and which will create a nice little highlight just around the edges there. Let's go ahead and turn our trace outline layer off for a moment. That way we can see it. Which brings us to blending out the trees. Let's switch over to using the blending tool now with the damp brush, like 5% brush size, 49% or so in opacity. Now starting right around the center, we're just going to use the same circular scrubbing paint strokes just to blend out the middle. And now to lightly blend out the edges here, just kind of puffing those out, creating some nice dimension. Creating some nice transparency between the sky and the tree here. And then we're going to repeat that on the right side tree, blending the middle and then blending the edges. And when you're happy with the blending on your tree, we're going to go ahead and add some more highlight and shadow to our painting. I'm going to go ahead and create a copy canvas layer, and we're going to paste it. Well, I don't think we need the trace outline anymore, so let's go ahead and paste it over the top. Now we're going to come back in here. Let's add a new layer, and we're going to put that layer into overlay. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now with the damp brush. Let's up our brush size to like 2%. Let's do like 40% or so opacity. Let's grab the first color in the first row, and we're going to use our sad face highlight again to add some detail highlight to our grass. Just bringing some more dimension into this area, and I'm kind of using it to carve out our grass just a little bit more, like right around the bush area. You don't want to be too heavy-handed with the highlight, and I am focusing it more on the top middle area than I will here at the bottom in just a moment. And I'm kind of curving my brush just a little bit too to kind of create the impression of hills going down the valley. And then over here, I'm going to add just a little bit. Let's move over here and repeat that same process on this right-hand side. Kind of carving out the edges of the grass just a little bit more. And over here. And I'm going to up my brush size just a little bit. Let's up it to like, still 2%, but a bigger 2%. And we're going to add just a little bit more highlight onto this area. And I am kind of curving the brush, still using the sad face highlight, but kind of the direction in which you curve will kind of create a nice hill effect. And then right around the base of the water, I'm going to kind of curve it downwards a little bit, kind of indicating a little bit of a bank. And you can do that all using the same paint stroke, which I absolutely love. And then we're going to move over here and repeat that again, moving our way down. And like here, I'm kind of creating the impression that there's more hill area, like it's a little bit steeper as we go down. And I always say less is more with highlight, especially in the shadowed areas. It'll bring more attention, which will create more contrast, which is definitely what you want. And then right around this bank area, we're going to kind of curve downwards. Kind of thinking of it like the light is we're kind of carving out where the light is touching, creating some nice peaks and valleys, kind of marrying all of the textures together. Around here, I'm going to switch the other way and kind of curve the bank it inwards. I think I just created a new word there. Squidwards, bank words. I don't know. And then down here, what are you guys going to do with me? I don't know. I'm going to just add just a little bit of color. Just like that. Let's turn the opacity of this layer down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 71%. Let's go ahead and add a new layer and put that layer into soft light again. And now switching back to the paintbrush with the damp brush. Let's grab the second color in the first row, the color black. Let's do full opacity, like 2% brush size. And right here in the center of the water, on this bottom one, I'm going to add just a little bit of a stripe of dark color here. Just like that. And then we're going to add just a little bit more right around there. Let's go ahead and switch over to the blending tool with the damp brush. Let's do 3% brush size, 62% or so opacity, and very lightly, back and forth scrubbing paint strokes, we're going to lightly blend this color into the bottom, just like this. And then let's turn the opacity of this layer down. Let's turn it down to like 72%. Let's add another new layer, put that layer into overlay. We're going to grab the color white, first color in the first row. Still using the paintbrush with the damp brush. Let's do like 2% brush size, full opacity. Now along this top edge, right along the middle, we're going to add just a little bit of highlight color here. Highlight color just like that. And then we're going to add it to the middle pool. Let's add a little bit of highlight running down the stream. Just like this, just kind of highlighting the shape and then kind of ending when we get into this bottom pool. And I'm going to run a little bit of highlight across the top, just like that. Let's go ahead and switch over to the blending tool now. So with the damp brush in the same settings, we're just going to lightly blend this color in. Just kind of softening it all up. I know it looks crazy right now, but here in a second it won't. This is how you can use overlays to create all kinds of colors that you don't need for your palette. That way you can have a much smaller palette, which is much more helpful to paint with. And we're just blending out this bottom here. Now let's turn this layer's opacity way down. Let's turn it down to like 41%. Which brings us to painting the rainbow. And we will actually need the trace outline layer again momentarily, so just kidding. All right, so let's zoom up here. Let's create another copy canvas and paste. Let's add another new layer. So let's switch over to using the hard airbrush now. I am actually going to have to move our trace outline layer back up so I can see our rainbow here. Let's use like 16% brush size, full opacity. And using the first color in the fifth row, we're going to paint along this edge here, ending about right there. I'm holding it down to correct the shape. Let's grab the second color in the fifth row and follow right underneath Follow right underneath. Sorry, that was my cat. And fill in that shape just like that. Doesn't need to be perfect. And I am going to insert a picture of my cat here. She's the best. And very jingly tonight. She's such a sweet and silly cat. This picture represents her like perfectly. She comes up and sits with me a lot when I'm painting. Let's grab the third color in the fifth row, the color yellow. And follow and repeat that same step underneath. Let's grab the fourth color green. And then grabbing the fifth color in the fifth row. And then finishing off with the sixth color in the fifth row. So you should have something that looks like this. And if the line's a little wobbly, that's okay. We're going to blur it out here in just a second. I'm actually going to make a copy of this just so we have it just in case. Let's go ahead and use Gaussian blur. And we're going to blur that layer to around 9%. Going to turn our trace outline off for just a moment. Let's create a duplicate of this layer, and I'm going to turn the duplicate layer underneath off for just a moment. Let's put this top layer into screen mode, and I'm going to turn it way down. Let's turn it to like 30%. Now this layer that we turned off, I'm going to turn it back on, and we're going to turn this layer way down too. Turn it down to like 15%. That way we've got a little bit more definition in it, but it still kind of creates a rainbow over top effect. Let's go ahead and add a new layer. We're going to put that layer into overlay. Let's grab the first color in the first row. Let's grab the soft airbrush. Let's do like full size and full opacity using the paintbrush. And we're going to paint a giant circle in the center of the painting, just like that, and then we're going to fill it in. Let's use Gaussian blur. Blur that layer to around 56%, and then we're going to turn it way down. Let's turn it down to like 25%. Let's go ahead and add another new layer. We're going to put that layer into overlay again. We're going to start here on this left-hand side. Let's switch over to the paintbrush now. Let's use the damp brush again. Let's do like 3% brush size, full opacity. Let's grab the first color in the first row, color white, and we're going to use circular scrubbing paint strokes on this bush right here, adding a little bit of highlight on top. Let's put a little bit on the top of this bush. Let's put a little bit down there. Let's finish off with this bush down here. Let's add a little bit of highlight to this bush right here. Just letting that kind of trail off towards the back. Let's put a little bit onto this one. And then a little bit onto this one. Actually, let's put a little bit right there. Kind of indicate another one right there. Let's switch over to using the blending tool now with the damp brush. Let's do like 5% brush size, 43% or so opacity. And we're going to just lightly buff and blend this new highlight color into the background. And I am kind of repeating that, working our way in rows. It'll definitely create a much more dimensional look that way. We're going to repeat that onto here, kind of preserving that dark edge a little bit. And then onto this one. And then we're going to work our way onto this one here, blending that out. Kind of softening that up. That got a little too harsh right there. Kind of just letting it fade off. Kind of really just implying that the light is living in this area here. And then finishing that off down here. Let's go ahead and turn this layer down. Let's turn it down to like 48%. And now we're going to add some details to the grass. Here in this upcoming section, we're going to be making short little flicks upwards and to the right and to the left in random and varying patterns to create the impression of grass using the water pen. We're going to go ahead and create a copy canvas layer and paste it over the top. Now, the one last thing I want to do, we're going to go ahead and create some grass texture. So let's use the water pen with the blending tool. Let's do like 3% brush size, full opacity. And just every so often, we don't need to make it too busy or too crazy. And we're going to sporadically add some textures here and there using short little flicks upwards to the right and to the left in random patterns to create some texture for our grass. And here towards the back, the flicks are going to be much smaller than they will be in the front just because it is so much further away. I'm going to put a couple of flicks over by the water. Let's move our way down and across, putting some across the bushes. That way it creates some dimension and a better grass line there. Definitely creating a little bit more definition between the edges of the bush and the ground itself. Just adding little flicks here and there just to create some nice texture. Just being careful using a really light hand to do this with. Putting a couple of grass strokes up against the water to create the look of kind of got some reeds growing up against the water area here. Then just repeating that across the bottom here. Nothing too defined just because the angle and perspective of this painting is quite a bit farther back, so we don't need anything too hyper detailed from this perspective. I am slightly getting larger as I'm getting closer to the bottom because the angle of the view is getting closer, which means we're going to see just a little bit more detail. So I'm making the grass strokes just a little bit more defined and a little bit bigger. Going to put a couple down here along the bottom, just to kind of separate the grass line and the water just a little bit better. The key to grass is definitely making it random and varying the paint stroke, making each new one random. Then we're going to repeat that across the right-hand side. And there on the back, I'm not adding too many. We're doing very light-handed across the back because we won't see that many grass blades from this far back. And I am just adding a couple against the bush line here. Basically just repeating this across the right-hand side. And this will create a better line between the background and the bushes just a little bit more. I would say with the grass and this one, less is definitely more. We just kind of want to create the impression of grass. And over here, I'm just going to add a couple that are kind of pointed towards the water. Finishing our grass up here at the bottom. And then when you're happy with your grass, I'm going to turn this layer's opacity down just a little bit. Let's turn it down to like 92%. Just kind of softens the look of it up just a little bit. And now I'm going to create a copy canvas layer and paste it over the top. And we're going to go ahead and use the hue and saturation tool, and I'm going to up the saturation of our painting to around 55% or so, and we're done. Now let's sign our painting. Thank you so much for watching, friend. I hope that you enjoyed the tutorial and had fun on this painting adventure. If you have any questions, let me know below. Thank you so much for all of the support, and I hope that you're enjoying your summer so far. If you want to continue painting, I have a ton of other tutorials now up on my channel, so definitely go check those out. And if you like this video and want to see more content like this, I invite you to like, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, friend, happy painting.